So in this video, we're going to focus on retaining walls. So there's the presumption that you have already reviewed all the videos that I have provided through the Allen block series that shows how the retaining wall is actually installed. As I mentioned before, in order to be a good designer, you actually have to understand the installation in order to be able to mimic those instructions on a set of drawings. So this individual already had a retaining wall project. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to focus on the section here above where there's a retaining wall that is basically, they've shown here, is 23 feet long. It will have a flat surface at the top because the ground slopes downwards and away from this location. So that's really where I'm going to focus my project on. Now, in order to do this particular retaining wall, rather than look at it from this perspective, I want to look at it from a perspective of 180-degree rotation. So here I'm going to type in UCS and press enter. And when I do that, I will get a command that comes up on the rotation of this icon. So UCS, enter. And it's asking me how I want to rotate it. I want to rotate around the z-axis. So that's the axis that's pointing at me. And I want to rotate it 180 degrees. And you can see the icon in the bottom left-hand corner is going to rotate. So it's upside down. So I want to view this plan from that direction. So now I type in the word plan, P-L-A-N, press enter twice. And the second time I press enter is to identify that it's in fact in the direction that I've put the UCS icon. So now you can see very clearly, this is my plan view. The higher soil is on the left, the lower soil is on the right. And I'm going to ignore the drawings that were already created. I'm going to use this perspective for my project. So I'm going to copy this section here first and move it over just so that I have a reference to its particular location. Then I can edit this. I'm going to remove all the information that's erroneous for our application. So we have it looks like a planter here of some sort. That's okay. I'm going to get rid of all that. That should be okay for now. And I've chosen Allen block specifically because many of the drawings are already done, which is perfect for my application. I do know that the corner of the house is right here. So this particular corner is located right below here. See this elevation? Is located right at the corner of the property where this is. Now, it looks like the drawing is slightly off. It's been moved. And this is something that is not very good. In fact, this is where it's supposed to go, right in this corner. So I'm going to ignore the fact that at some time this drawing was moved. And I'm going to work with this drawing here instead. So let's move all this detail to another location where I can line all this stuff up. Okay, so this house here, this is my corner. This is my retaining wall. I'm going to take this line that's right here. This is the building envelope, the brick. It's been identified as hatch, which is fine. I'm just going to draw a construction line straight down from this corner. Now, if you notice at this corner here, that's where the dimension was coming from. This line will go straight down along here. And this is where some of the drawing elements are going to be based from. So I'm looking at the top view here below and the plan view or the elevational view of the house right in this location. Now I'm going to open up some of the drawings that I have specifically for this. And in here I have a series of drawings that I've downloaded from Allen block to be able to actually draw this particular gravity wall. So I'm double clicking them to open them. And as I double click them to open them, it's going to show me different perspectives or views. Now, all of this here, information, I want to make sure that I move it from the layers that they've selected to layer 0. And the reason I'm doing that is when I go to import this information into my CAD drawing, I can then control what layer I place it on. If I just import it as is right now, it will select the layers that I've selected and create a whole bunch of new layers on my drawing, which is not what I want. So I want to make sure that I am controlling the layers that this is going to be moved from A to B. So there is my first drawing, and I'm going to go through here and find the rest of them and place them into this particular drawing file. There you go. So there's the inside corner detail, and that was again shown on the view, and the geotextile fabric. That's really what I'm interested in using here. So once again, I'll select everything, turn to layer 0. See all these extra layers? If I import that, that's what would come in. I don't need that. I'm going to use my layers my way. I want to have full control of the drawing. So I have that one. I have a swell detail. So I'm looking at this because I may consider, rather than using a drainage pipe, because of the small height that it is, I may not need a drainage pipe. I may simply use a swell, which is a land impression that makes the water flow in a specific direction. So that may be a consideration for this. So I'm opening up all of these different drawings that are here from Allen Block to be used for my project. Great. Now I've got them all opened, and you can see they're all tabbed right above. Here's my original drawing. And in that drawing, I have my model space, which is right here, and I've got this information. So I need to draw this retaining wall from all the different sides. So I'm looking at the top view. I want to draw it from this direction, from this direction, from this direction, so the builder can clearly see how I intend to build this wall. But also I want to cut through the wall to show him how the structure is going to go together. So it's going to take me a little while, and that's okay, but I'm going to make sure that this is very clear to the builder. Okay, gravity wall. This is my sectional view, and you'll notice that the low side is here and the high side is here. It's the exact opposite of what I want in my project. So I may have a couple of other issues in the fact that I'm not too sure whether this is drawn in imperial or in metric. So we're going to see when we import this. So edit, copy with base point. There we go. Select the entire object, press enter, go to my drawing, and I'm going to paste it. Edit. And I don't want to paste this block because I want to be able to dissect, move, and change it. If I wanted to leave it as is, I'd paste it as block. So it becomes a single entity, and therefore I can't make any changes to it. I could eventually just explode it, which is another command which breaks these blocks, but I'm going to just paste it this way. And there it is. So my fear is there. What it is actually in metric instead of in imperial. And this becomes my challenge. How do I convert the two? I've got some indicators here. This says that it's a 4-inch offset. So I'm going to try a couple different ways just to make sure I verify the actual size. The first way is to draw a 4-inch line. So I'm in the landscape layer, which is just a layer I've selected, and I'll type in at 4 less than 90. There we go. So that's what 4 inches on my drawing is. This is what 4 inches on the actual inserted drawing from Allen Block. I'm going to scale this up now. I'm going to click on Scale, select everything, and this time I'm going to type in R and enter for remove. And now I can click on that line, and it removes that line from the selection set. Good. Now I'm finished selecting or unselecting. I press enter. And the base point is the bottom of this. That's where I drew both the reference line as well as where the base of the 4 inches is going to be. So I click on that. Now I type in REF or just R, and I'm going to say from the base point, click to the 4 inches that they say that is on their diagram. Click to the 4 inches that I want on my diagram. Click. And now it should be to the right scale, and it looks right. Everything's great. All right, let's make sure some of the other dimensions are correct. I'm not too sure about the accuracy of the original drawing. I would assume it is accurate only because it's a CAD drawing, and I'm hoping that somebody actually drew this properly. So make sure you've got this correct. Now, you can see very clearly that this is the wrong direction. The high is on the left side, the low is on the right. So I need to mirror this. Okay, so I'm going to mirror this image, and I'm going to pick the footing once again and press enter. I want to erase the source, so yes, and enter. You can see what I've done. I've picked the wrong item, and that's why the mirror is off. Okay, what's a safer bet? Make your own line. So I'm going to click on a line from the footing straight up. I've got my F8 key on, and that's going to be my mirror line. It's just a way of assuring stuff. You can see how easy it is to make a mistake. Now, mine was very obvious. You may not be so obvious in yours and be out a couple of degrees, and it's going to really ruin the drawing. So this time I'm using my reference line as the mirror. I want to delete the source, yes, and there is my drawing. Now, I've mentioned before that we only want a 2-foot retaining wall height. So let's measure what I've got here from there to there, and it's 2 foot 6 and 5/8. So it's out by about 6 inches. That's not a big deal. So I can leave it at that, or what I can do is raise the grade here 6 inches, or raise the top 6 inches so the grade above it leaves a bit of a gap. I like that secondary option. So I'm going to just adjust this ever so slightly. I'm going to move this grade line from the top of the wall, maybe down to the base of the wall, and that will give me a nicer look. So move here, because then I've got a bit of a ledge there from that position down to here. And once again, you can see how the hatching has adjusted. I'm going to do the same thing that I've done now several times, where I'm just going to adjust this hatch, and now it's complete. This is the nice part about using a manufacturer's drawing, because the information is already complete in there. Now, this retaining wall is going to have some pavers or some sort of decking material or something, but this is what I want for now, and that represents this line. Okay, so what line and how do I line this up do I actually use? Let's draw the corner of the building. So there's the corner of the building. And I'm going to pick up that point, and it's a construction line which goes straight down. I've got to determine how this wall is going to angle into this wall. Do I want to expose some of the stone on the other side, or do I want to start it right at the base? I've determined basically that I'm going to move all of this information. So where grade is on this side is where it's going to meet the wall. Okay, how is that actually going to look in elevation? So I want an elevational look on the building, so I see what it looks like on the building. And in order to do that, I'm going to copy and paste certain elements and then make them a group so you can see it. So, but for now, I'm going to copy this series of blocks, and that's where I would want that top to be. And you can see the slope, and you can see how that last block is going to be covered. Now, you can see the grade that's with the building is way down here. And that may be the case, in which case that I've got to make sure that I match the existing grade, which is on the architectural drawing. So these are all field measurements, and it may be afterwards I've got to reposition the block work. If I've got a deck that overhangs this, I just want a retaining wall high enough for the soil, and the deck can go over top of it. There's lots of different options, but for now, that seems to work. Okay, so this is my sectional view. From my sectional view, I can develop everything else. I'm going to move now this drawing so it lines up with what? That top stone. Okay, copy this from anywhere, okay, wherever it intersects something, to that point here. That is the top of my stone. So now I can move this so it's lined up with the house. Make sure I zoom in and pick up the right line. Great. Now I don't need that line anymore because that's the only alignment I need for this. Now I'm ready to draw some of the other visual elements. So the elevation, I've got the section through it. This is the corner detail from above. I don't know if I'm going to be using a corner detail. What's nice about this is it gives me the geotextile material. Excellent. What about this, the swale? So I may determine I'm going to use a swale instead of the actual drainage pipe, but you'll notice that the swale has limitations to the height of the block. And if we go beyond that, it may actually cause some problems. Now, this is impermeable soil, which means that it's designed not to allow water to flow through it. That may not be available, or that may be very expensive. So the swale may not be the best option for collecting water and removing it from that location. I may want to use that drain pipe. So these are some of the decisions I may make along the way instead of making them abruptly and say, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and then stick with it. Okay, this is an elevation from the side. I like this one. So I'm going to copy and paste that. So copy with base point, pick a point, select everything, go back to my original drawing. Okay, where does that appear? Okay, I'm going to paste this, and I want to paste it in such a way that it's not a block element. Notice the heights of this. Okay, I don't have a reference line or a height here to make sure I scale it correctly, but I do have here. So I want to make sure this drawing all lines up. So I'm going to use the top of this and the top of this. See, it's the same point on the block. Then I can line this up to one of those. There we go. And then I can use the scale command again. So here we go, scale, select everything. Scale what? From this corner. There's my reference. So type in R and enter. So this to this, I want equal to perpendicular that line. There are my blocks here. Now equal my blocks on this side. Isn't that fabulous? Great. Now, notice how some of my writing is interfering with some of the information. Here's a little trick that makes this life a bit easier for you. I'm going to move. Now, instead of selecting anything, I'm going to type in P and enter for previous. P, enter. Notice how it picks everything? Excellent. And I want to move it horizontally away from that image. Great. Where does that occur? Well, that actually occurs on this face here. That's the face that it's actually going to occur on. That's the wall. But I don't have that wall there. I do have some imagery there I could copy. So I will copy this in the hatching from there. And I'm going to move it down into here. And that's the face that will come from that part of the building outwards. So let's hold that down. Here we go. And I will rotate that to line up with that. Again, I'm going to use the previous option, P and enter. I'm going to rotate that so it lines up with that wall. There we go. And it's 90 negative. And that's the wall configuration that's coming off the other side. So now I'm going to move this. Oops. I'm going to move, select previous. That should pick everything. I just picked something else, so it's not going to. And that's going to line up with the corner of the wall here. There's my brickwork. So all of the bricks that are here are either going to be full size as this or cut. So now I can copy some of this. That one's full size. This one's going to be cut. So trim to my line. Notice it's saying I cannot trim this object. Why? Okay, they've created certain elements with this. So I don't know whether they've actually turned this into a block or whether that itself is a grouped item. So I'm going to go into here and select group. See, that says group, so I can't use that. So I'm going to use explode. So EXPLODE, and it should have exploded that into separate elements. It did. So now I can trim this. There we go. That's an erase. That one's not intersecting. And you can see that this line here is slightly out. Just delete it. I'm just using the top of this block. And there is my block itself. That's how it's going to look in this location. Now, notice how it's missing some lines. I'm just going to use one of their existing lines and click it and move its position. So without drawing a line, I just used it. Now, I didn't trim the actual boundary of that hatch. So I got a couple of options here. Let's see. I'm going to trim to that line, this boundary, see if it works. It's giving me a symbol saying it's not going to trim it. And again, that may have been a block element. Let's see what they've done with that. Group. Nope. I'm going to try explode. And now what is it? Those are all individual lines. Well, it takes up a bit of memory, but I'm going to do that. It's a bit easier. I just selected and deleted it by exploding a hatch. You can explode hatches. So this is the side view of that. However, you can see it's not aligned. Nothing's where it should be. I want to align that horizontally. So I've got how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4 viewed, and then the bottom one not. So this step has to be lower. This is where that bottom block will be. That's where the big 2-foot difference is. And that's what I got to line up first. And then, okay, and then I'll add the stones that I need. So I will move all of this and that. Now, the text itself, I may be using at a later time. I'm not too sure right now. Hold on, where my reference line is at the slope. So it's from the slope down, perpendicular to my construction line. Great. And that line references that. I don't need that anymore. I've got another set of blocks. Now, what is the length of this? The length of that is the length of this. I got 22 feet 3 inches. This is a long retaining wall. Now, typically they're not that long for such a short height, but in this particular case they wanted that, so I'll stick with that. That's not a problem. So I will copy this line from here to there, and I'm going to pick this endpoint, and it's supposed to be 22 feet 3 inches. Okay, let's offset that. Now, sometimes after we do this, we find that our retaining wall or our dimensions or something is off. It's way too big. So at this point, we can change our plan view by, I'm just going to remove this line. We can change our plan view by the results of what we're getting here. Okay, so let's move this now from the beginning of the house here to what they said that they wanted to. And that's how big or long that wall is. You can see that's huge. That is massive. Now, the land slope is right in the beginning. So we're going to have that slope is exactly the way it's shown here. And then it's going to level off. Okay. And the leveling position is this line. That's where the natural land slope is, or the level is. So eventually I want to reach this point. Now you can see the amount of lines I've got here. It starts getting confusing. So I'm going to delete some of these here. And I've got to add 2 more rows of blocks. So let's copy all of this. 2 more rows. Looks good. Did I get everything? I think I did. And that will go. I'm trying to use perpendicular. Oh, see, I was missing that line. I can't do that. So once again, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to use previous. See how that previous command really comes in handy? Super. And I want to pick that up from this point here. Now I can see there was some inaccuracy in their original drawing, but that's okay. Perpendicular to that line there. And that's the height of the block here. Now you can see that they have this suggested minimum bond burial block extension and this sort of a step where it is. So I'm going to copy this configuration. So those are the lines in that hatch that I'm going to copy from one location to another using their distance recommendation. So what's their distance recommendation? From this point to that point there. See what's happened? That's the step that they're recommending here. Now, we can easily adjust this and make it wider. You can't make it shorter. So that's the key with this is always we can make it wider. We can't make it shorter. So I'm going to change this a bit. Now, it may seem a bit confusing. I'm just going to get rid of some of these notes because I'm going to make that on paper space as opposed to here in model space anyways. So let's get rid of that note. I want to have at least another block in here. So I'm going to copy all this information here. And I'm using crossing. And it looks like it picked it up good. And I'm going to copy that from this corner to that corner. That looks good. That's where the step's going to be. Okay, now you can see I'm erasing and deleting. Why? Because I don't want to measure a lot of this stuff out. So in order to avoid measuring it, I'm just using it as a reference in another location. Now I'm going to copy this. There's my hatch. There's my line work. I'm not going to include these lines because I want to show where they're actually going to go. And now I'm going to use that reference of where it is. See the inaccuracy in their drawing here to where I want it to be, that corner there. Oops, I made a mistake here. I used the wrong reference here. So I'm going to want to copy this here, good, from this corner, that's better, to that corner. And you can see how it nicely follows the path. I don't need this line. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use that line to remove some of the hatch. I'm going to trim to this line my double hatch. See, I've got a couple of items here that are double hatched here. See that? That hatch has gone all the way over here. Now, this hatch doesn't have a boundary edge. Not too sure why. And you can see after I copied and pasted, there's some inaccuracies with the drawing itself. So we can't really trust somebody else's work to be perfect. We'll work with it. But again, this is one of those things where, like I said here, when I copied and pasted that, I'm getting a slight bit of inaccuracy. I'm going to move that up a bit. And let's see if I can hatch this now. See that circle? That meant that I couldn't trim it. I couldn't trim my hatch because it wasn't a proper boundary edge. There we go. Now allowed me to trim that hatch. And now I can remove that. I don't have this issue anymore. Good. So there's my drawing, and I'm going to keep using that step. And you can see I'm going to get very close to getting this to a very short retaining wall very soon. That's the height of grade that's behind all this. That's where grade is back here. So that's the height I need to maintain. Here's where I can make a design decision and say, I want to have 2 layers of block or 1 layer of block or 3 layers of block visible for the remainder of this. And that's okay to do. That's not a problem. So I'll have a very soft, gentle slope through here. And by doing that, it's very easy to make those types of decisions and carry them through. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I want to make sure that I'm using the right series of blocks. There we go. So that I can pick up this corner here and I can repeat that pattern there all the way to the end. Now, for the purposes of the drawing, when we start making the viewports, we may change this a bit because we don't need all that extensive block work. Here's something I wanted you to notice though, which is important. I don't want to have to do extra cutting. See how this 23 foot 3 inch distance, 23 foot 3 inch distance doesn't work out properly? That's where I need to take what I've got here and now decide, hey, am I going to adjust that length? Yes, I am. So I want to make sure I'm on a full block here. So I'm going to move that. And remember, anything you adjust here in terms of its length, you should adjust in the plan view as well, because you're going to base some of those measurements from there. And I will move this edge so I get a nice full-size block here. And this will be a corner block. Now, for something to be a corner block, it has the same features of the other types of blocks. So not trimming this, I will stretch this to that location. It didn't let me. Why? Because I have to explode it again. And explode. Now let me try to stretch it. Let's see if it works this time. Yay! We did it right. That's a corner block. Okay. I think what I did, I exploded the hatch earlier and I missed the block, and that's why I had that, because the hatch changed automatically beautifully. So now I can take all of this. Let's see if I can extend all this. Extend to here. There's my subsoil elements. It's not going to let me extend this. I should be able to. I'm going to take that point. Let's see if it's going to let me do this. And doesn't look like it's cooperating, although be it, you know me, I'm a bit of a type of person that doesn't go very well. That's what's happened to the hatch. The hatch is missing. It's missing a vertice. I'm going to right click on this one. Actually, I just moved my mouse over top of it. Add a vertice and see what it does. Add a vertex. There we go. Is that working? Or is it backwards now? It's backwards. Now I'm going to click that way. Click that up. Click this up. And let's see. Good. I'm going to move this into position. I'm going to pick on nearest. There. The hatch is now all the way through. There's my retaining wall from this side. What am I missing? I'm missing the cap. That's all that I'm missing. So that cap sits on top of this. Look at this profile. Now, the reason I mentioned the profile of the cap, because I'm going to use that as my end piece. So there's my cap. I'm going to copy that over. And the way it notches in, it's flush with the face, but notches in underneath that. So that notch is actually not seen, but that face is flush with this face. Okay, I don't want to hatch this because it's an elevation. So I'm going to, oops, remove that. They must have blocked all these elements together. There we go. So when I try to remove that, press delete, the whole thing went. I'm going to press or type in explode. You can see this command is really handy when you're using other people's works. And I can delete that. Good. Now I'm going to mirror this because it's in the wrong direction. And there we go. Delete the original source. Yes. And that sits here. That edge lines up with that edge. How do I know? That's what they're showing here. These two line up. Okay. So you can see what's happening here. This block, you can see part of it is recessed. So I'm going to move this up. Now, again, this is a polyline, so there's a couple of ways of treating this. I'm going to see if I can just remove the vertices, and so it lines up in here. I only need two in here. It's just cleaning up my drawing. That's all I'm doing is cleaning this thing up. And by removing all those vertices, it's now a single line from one side to the other. Beautiful. That's what I want. Now, for the rest of this, I want to make sure that my line work is correct throughout this. You can see there's a double line there. Here's a line there. I'm going to take this and I'm going to stretch this thing right from one end to the other, from there all the way to here. And I want to have this line work down here. Let's see if it'll let me do this. Copy. I don't want to pick up the hatches. It's going to pick up the hatch. Okay. From there, and I want to copy that up because what I want is this triangular shape. Okay. This one was edited, so it's giving me a bit of grief. So here we go. I'm going to explode this whole image. Enter. Good. I'm going to remove the hatch because I don't want to see that anymore. And I want to have this face and this face combined, so I will move this from here to here. Look at that, it's not letting me doing it. I need to explode that again. Can I copy and trim? I might be able to do that. Let's try. Again, when you're doing your own work, you know what you've done and how you've created these elements. When you're copying somebody else's work, you haven't got a clue. All right, so can I remove that? I'm going to explode it. All of this. There we go. I lost my polyline thickness. Now, I may look at that and say, you know what, I'm going to keep the polylines. If I'm going to keep the polylines, I can't explode it the way I did here. So I'm going to undo it. Or you can say, no, I'm going to get rid of all the thicknesses on all of these things here. So how can I actually work with this? I'm going to try different things here. So that's part of this, that's part of that, that's part of that. What if I actually create a rectangle? I'm going to try this. And then trim to that. So even with the manufacturer's drawing, there's a fair bit of work that I have to do. Look at that, that worked. I don't know if that's individual. Let's see if I can get rid of that. That worked. I can get rid of that. Good, it let me do that. I can get rid of that. Now you're going to see why I'm doing all this in a moment. And what do I have here? There's my L shape there. I don't want that, so I'm going to remove that vertice. There's two of them in here. I don't think I need this second one because I think I've got an overlap of line. I do. So this one in here, I'm going to remove that vertice. And you can see they've got some ugliness going on in here with the drawing accuracy level. If any of you are familiar with my program, That sure ain't acceptable. Let's see. So I'm going to fix this. It didn't mirror it. Let's try it again. So I'm going to mirror that from there straight down. I don't need these little lines here. They're part of this vertex too. See, they've used the technique where they got lines over top of lines. That's okay. We'll do the best we can. And remove. That's the work I want. I've got a couple extra here I want to get rid of too. And in some cases, it's easier just to trace over it, do your own from square one. Remove that. Okay. That's what I want in here. So now I can move this. Now, I'm looking at their line work here. And this line is consistent. Okay. So I'm going to copy. Now, I'm going to copy this in a slightly different way because I want to trim some of this away. So I'm going to pick nearest and copy it over there. Why? Because I want this second line. Now I could redraw it, but the problem I'm finding here is the fact that they've done these polylines so thick that, oops, I picked the wrong line. There we go. They've done these polylines so thick that if I remove part of it, I'll remove a lot of it. Remove vertex. There we go. That's the line I want to keep or maintain. The bottom part, I don't. I don't want to have the secondary feature because the caps didn't. So I can move now this from that point perpendicular to this and then trim to this line all of this stuff in here. Good. This needs to be a delete. There we go. That's what that's going to look like. That's what that cap looks like. And it's featured in here. And I don't have this extra line in here, so I can trim. Now you may take a look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of work. Yeah, but you know what? This is a legal document, and I want to make sure whoever's building this is using all the proper methods of installing this particular block. So let's copy this over and see, I brought that straight up using F8. So that's in alignment with this one down here. And I want to do the same here. And then I want to trim that to that line. There we go. That's the look I want. So what I know is this line. I don't want to be trimming this line all the time, so now I can get rid of it. But what I do know is this. I can copy this line and these elements from that point onwards. And see, the line's already trimmed correctly. And that's how I'm going to draw my cap. And since there's only a single node up here, I know that I'll pick it off correctly all along here. And do that, and that, and that, and that. And what's going to happen at the end, I'm going to have a half block at the end again. That's okay. And then I can delete that. So hopefully by viewing the video first on how this material is installed, it's going to help you get a better idea of what the product is and how it should be drawn so that the builder can see very precisely how this is. Now, the last element I don't have here is grade. I'm going to copy the grade that's in this diagram here. I'm going to copy this and then trim off the excess. So from that corner to where do I want it to begin? Well, I want to have one block exposed and then grade below that. So that's going to go right to about here. And this line work almost lines up pretty well here. That line work, I'm going to change that to about grade here. Let's see what happens here. It's not low enough, or it's too high there. And that kind of lines up with the house side. Now, typically there's 6 inches of concrete. So if I want to actually do this accurately, I got to bring that line down to here. And what's happened here is that this course is okay, but this one isn't. I can't have exposed soil, and they recommend at least 6 inches of ground or of the rock being buried. So all of this really needs to occur somewhere around here. So I have to adjust this because of the grade. So these are all elements we think about as designers to make sure this is all done correctly. So I'm going to stretch. Let's go. Stretch. And again, it may not let me. I can't remember what's blocked, what's not blocked. I'm going to stretch, and then I'll type in R and enter because I don't want to stretch this, and I don't want to stretch that. Okay, I want to stretch that line work to that point here. So I want to go from this point here to, I want to get a full block underneath. There we go. Now, the block work stretched nicely. This did not. The actual shape of this. Now, this is not a big thing because I'm just going to take the hatch and I'm going to move it perpendicular to here. And I'm going to take that hatch here and I'm going to move that perpendicular to that middle line here. Line there. Wow, I got a lot of stuff here that's going on with their hatches. So what's the best solution here? I'm going to forget theirs. I'll go into file or home. I'm going to create a polyline. It's a temporary line, and I'll create it from there down to the line I created. Great. And this hatch here, I'm not happy with at all. Look at that. It's a mess. I'll delete it. And I'm going to fill it. This corner here is the other end closed off. It looks like it is. And that's the hatch I want to use. They've got some extra lines here. Let's see if I can do it this way. And remove, stretch, add, forget that. So I'm going to hatch inside there myself. So hatch, pick a point, press enter, all is done. Now, how far did my hatch go? It went right in and underneath. So I'm taking their original hatch and just getting rid of it. Look at how much simpler that was. This is what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's just basically easier for you to do yourself. Now, I'm missing the block work in here. No big deal. I'm just going to copy and paste all this. So copy, and these are all individual hatches. So what do I want to copy? I'm going to copy, do a crossing across several of these. Did I get all the line work? I hope I did. And from there down to there. Yep. And down to there. Yep. And even though I said I needed it at least to this point, you can see what's happening here. The block is not a full block member. It's a half block member. So I have an option here. Let's remove that guy. And now I got to stretch it back. Let's see if it works better with my hatching and my line work. I can remove the stretching of these things and go from that spot to that spot. And these, I'll do the same thing. That perpendicular to this and that perpendicular to this. You can see that because I hatched it, it's working out much better. That is the rear elevation. That's the elevation from the side of the house, from not this side, but from this side of the house. And you can see this is the information that's in the background. And I could easily copy and paste all of that to really get a nice visual on where it sits on the property. That's a possibility. Or like I did just from the corner of the house, I wanted to get where they had their grade levels set. And there's my left elevation. My right elevation, or I'm sorry, there's my right elevation. My left elevation, I only see that cap, that little bit there. So I can actually avoid doing an elevation in this particular case. But look at what I actually see. So this section, and this is where we need to identify information like that. That section there actually does not occur right here. That section occurs right here, the highest part of the wall. So when I'm going to draw my section line here in the different views, that's where that sectional line is going to be. My end view is only that height. It's much smaller. So this is my top view, and that's not going to need to be corrected. There's a couple of elements here that I need to add. There's my top view. There's my sectional view. There's my right side view. The only thing I don't have is my end view. My end view is this, but to that grade height that I have here. Now I'm going to get rid of some of this extra grade because I don't need it. This grade here actually comes down here because it comes out flat after this. So that's the only part of the end wall that I'm going to see. I don't need all this extra grade that I've got in here, so I'm going to trim this away. Remember, I stole that information from the house. So by copying it over here, I got a lot of stuff I don't need. And then that allows me to take this and I just move over top and remove the vertex. Move over top, remove, move over top, remove. Okay, now typically grade is shown as 2 lines. So I'm going to offset this one 2 inches. Offset, where's my offset? 2 inches, and that line goes down. And there is my grade line. So you can see part of the wall is buried, part of the wall is above. It's designed to hold the soil from behind. That's the height of the wall here. And that's the height of the wall. Actually, the height of the wall, I drew incorrectly. From there across here. There's the height of that last bit of wall here. And what will happen is over this block, that grade is going to go from here to there. So there's going to be a significant slope at the end. So this is the view that I'm going to be drawing my end or my end view of that block. I'm going to see one full block and the cap in solid form, and then 2 blocks basically I'm going to see hidden. Remember, our elevations, the different elevations, are based on what is seen and what isn't seen. So let's do this. This is the sectional view. So my elevational view, I can get rid of all this excess information. I don't need that because this is good information that I need to have when I'm working on the details, because I'm going to have to basically retype them out. There we go. And remember, what do I see? I've got 1, 2, 3 blocks. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm at what's at the bottom here. So this stuff that's in here, once again, I'm questioning whether I should actually show or use their method of hatching or create my own hatch. Notice I've got a drain tile here. That drain tile is below the lowest block. If I bring the drain tile here, it will go towards the house, which is okay, but I got to provide some areas out here that tile can drain away from the house so that it isn't something that will drain to the house. So I have to provide an exit hole here for the drain tile. I'm going to get rid of some of this erroneous material. So that drain tile, and you can, if you saw the video, they actually have these tools that allow caps or drainage areas to come out. I'm not going to show it that way. I'm going to use this pipe, and I'm going to copy it and move it somewhere out here. It might be easier to cut 2 blocks, put a hole in one. Yeah, let's cut 2 blocks. And if they have a specific interface that I can latch onto this opening, like a grill or something, I'll drain it out to there. So that's where I'm at. Okay, there are my height differences. This is my sectional view. My front view is going to be shown right at this height. I got 1 exposed, 2 underneath, 1 exposed, 2 underneath. So all of this information here, I don't need. This I don't need. That I don't need. This is where I've got 1 exposed. I want this level right up to here. So let's try to stretch this out. And it's 2 blocks higher. I'm going to see if I can just go and use the method of just copying 2 blocks higher. Does that look right? I've got one exposed block, so it's somewhere in here. So it's going to be at the top of that wall there. But you know what? I'm going to change this a bit because I need that 6 inches of subsoil information, the compacted soil there. So that's really where it should be. So it's only going to move 2. Okay. I'm trying to speak as I'm thinking so you get a sense of what I'm doing. I removed 2 blocks, so I'm going to move this from here up 2 blocks. 1 block, 2 block, and use perpendicular. There we go. That's the correct height. Now the grade out here is incorrect. Now I'm going to move that up to that height. So I will move, move that line that they show here from there up to there. Good. There's my hatch for all this stuff. And it's all kind of all over the place here. So I may end up just rehatching this. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep that hatch pattern. So I've got it. This is the soil, or the compacted fill. It's going to come out right to there. That looks great. And since I'm looking at the end of all these, I don't see this information. Oops, I need to explode that. I don't see all this information that's inside because we're not cutting through the material. We're seeing the end material. So that gets still deleting. I didn't explode it well enough. Looks like I may have had to explode everything twice. I'm not too sure. Again, I'm looking at somebody else's drawing, so I don't know what they've done. That looks better. Here we go. Now, if I'm looking at the ends of these, I actually don't see a lot of that internal stuff as well. It looks like I'm going to have to explode it again. They've used referenced drawings that are referenced, that are referenced, that are referenced. Oh, I'm afraid that if I explode that, then I'm going to lose my line work, the quality of the line work. Let's see if I can trim all this to itself. No, I'm going to have to explode it. There we go, and get rid of that. So what do I see at the end? This is where, again, visualizing this is very important. Let me show you. I'm going to copy this grade line from there to the grade line that they have here. That's the grade line that they have here. Therefore, I don't need this anymore. I won't see the geotextile material because it's hidden. I'm not going to see any of this down in here. It's hidden. But what I'm going to do is I'm leaving it, and it will be shown as hidden lines. So let's extend this to here. There we go. So everything below here is hidden lines. Notice how tall this is? That's not right. I've got my secondary grade right here. So that's got to slope down dramatically here. And I'm going to use this that's where it enters, and this is where it's going to come out much lower. So let's use this line work here. So let's stretch this from there. And it's going to come out here. So that's where grade is actually shown from the end view. Everything below this will be hidden lines. Everything above it will be solid lines. Now I can take this. Polylines have a unique feature where I can go to this and actually add another vertice depending on how it was drawn. The other way we can do that, which sometimes is simpler, is simply to copy something I've already got drawn, add it to here. Make sure you're hitting the right element. I want to hit the end of that. Let's move. I had my F8 on. And I'll take my F8 off temporarily so it hits the end of it. Good. And fillet this polyline to this polyline. See, it cleans up that edge. And I'll fillet this polyline to this polyline. There we go. It cleaned up the edge. So that's grade at the end of this. So when I look at the end of this wall, this is what I'm going to see. That's how grade's going to look. The only thing I haven't got is how the stones are going to look. Because again, these are cornerstones. So this is actually going to move up perpendicular to that line. And in here, it's going to do the same. See if I can stretch it. So you can see there's a lot of modification that goes on, but that's the nature of this. The end stones, and if you watch the video, you can see how they wrapped around the corners. That's what we'll see. There is some line work in here that I can add to this. Now, I did that somewhere else. I won't remember where I did that. So instead, I'm going to copy this and move that up here. I just need that line. That's a polyline with the right specifications, the right thickness, and everything else. So here, let's see if I can remove enough of these vertices that will allow me to do that. Yep, and then I can move this line to where it should be, which is here. And then I will copy that line. Now it all depends on the stone itself, what you're actually going to be using. And so there's a lot of information here that will be adjusted based on what your application is, what you're actually going to be using. As you know before, when we talked about stonework and anything of that nature, it is completely dependent on the manufacturer's drawings, what they've allowed for and how it's to be used. So in essence, I've got my side view, I got my sectional view, and I've got my end view. There's a few things I need to do in order to correct this. This all needs to be hidden line types below. So a lot of this line, like that one and that one, I'll go in and change not my thickness, but my line type to be a hidden line type. Okay. And depending on, like you can barely see it here, but in the viewport, it'll come out correctly. And there's my end view, my sectional, or my end, my sectional, and my elevational view along with the building face. And this is the view here that I can then copy onto the elevation. This is what it's actually going to look like when I bring this into the project. When I bring this into here, and the top of that wall is going to stay continuous, and you can see then grade will adjust downwards along the length of the wall. So looking at this and our final project, if I go to what she was working on, that's what she was creating here. Notice how she cut the wall to make it shorter. There's the house. There's indicating the footings, the drain tile. This is the subgrade, underneath grade. What does she have here? So there's my retaining wall, all the different elements there's the top of the wall that need to be in the soil to make sure there's proper drainage. And she showed the tile the same way because it's sloping towards the house. We have to exit the house. That's what she's showing here. Although this application is underground, so that pipe would continue somewhere as indicated here and go to another location. And then we have L5, this is how she's showing the section, and then the end view of the section and the cap. So there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of work to be done here. This is going to take some time to work on. And as you work through the retaining walls, you'll find that each manufacturer has a different type of installation technique. You really need to train yourself on the product and how the product's to be used in order to make sure that the installation of the product is correct and your drawing is demonstrating that installation. Well, I hope this is going to help with retaining walls. There is a lot of video that's out there. Make sure you're using the manufacturer video because, again, it is something that is subject to the environment. Canada has certain rules and regulations that you have to follow with something like a retaining wall, whereas in other locations that are further south, they don't follow the same type of rules. Well, thanks for joining me, and good luck with putting this retaining wall together. It really is a visualization challenge, but I'm sure you can all do this very well.